Welcome to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today I'm hosting Frank Carbajal from the Es Tiempo LLC Foundation. He is also the founder of the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. In this episode with Frank, we dive deep into the early stages in his elementary school foundation, as well as how he went to college and how Es Tiempo LLC was founded and the idea behind it. We will also learn who he looks up to and who his mentors were. Welcome, Frank. Let's get started. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. This is a Zoom video. This is an interview that we'll be doing. It'll be a video as well as an audio. You can find it in the podcast for the audience that always listens to us. Today I have the pleasure of having Frank Carbajal, who is the founder of Es Tiempo LLC. And he's also the founder, and he started at Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. And that has been going on for about 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. And he's been doing quite a lot of things. He's also an author of a very fantastic book that he will be able to tell us. So I'm going to allow Frank Carbajal to do more of an introduction on himself. Welcome, Frank. Welcome to Success Innovation.
Welcome and good afternoon, Lizardo. It's a pleasure to be here, and I am very honored that you asked me to be on your show.
Well, I'm honored to have you for sure, because I followed you on LinkedIn and I saw that you were doing wonderful stuff over in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in particular with the Silicon Valley area. So, yes. So if you can kind of briefly tell us a little bit about who you are and how those wonderful things about you came to be.
Yes, definitely. So I originally I was born in El Centro, California, which is about 25 miles north of Mexicali. I'm a first-generation American Latino, and in 1972, my parents moved up to, back then it was known as Santa Clara Valley, now known as the Silicon Valley.
Right.
They worked in the fields, picking anything from tomatoes, apricots, cherries. And so with humble beginnings, both my parents also worked in canneries. And canneries was the typical work for most Mexican-American families. Now, growing up in an environment where I really aspired to greatness and do things that really helped our community, I realized at a very young age that the journey would have to start with an education. So being the first American Latino graduate from my family to not only attend college, but graduate from a local university here in the Silicon Valley known as San Jose State University, I attained an undergrad and a master's degree. And one of the things that I felt that was really required for our community to succeed was to share our stories and tell our stories, and the stories that.
So continue. You were saying that you were telling us about the story and the canneries of your family and how education is essentially important for a Latino to actually be successful in this country nowadays.
Yes, it's very important that as Latinos, we attain an education. The way I see education is not only an exit ticket to succeed, but a giving ticket. So what I mean by that is it's important to never forget where we came from. So we attain an education, we obtain success. It's very important to give back. And through my journey in college, I realized that it was very important to elevate and celebrate our Latino community. And by doing so, I always had this dream of writing a book. And the book that I wrote was successfully published in 2008 by Wiley & Sons. And the great Ken Blanchard believed in me, wrote the foreword. And with those prominent stories in my book, and in 2008, it was during the time of a crisis, the market crash.
Right. Yeah. The market crashed. the home prices were exuberant and everybody lost their shirt essentially. If you had a loan that was interest only with an arm, it was gonna, it was really difficult, and everything like the valuation on homes was really hard, and everybody, particularly Latinos who bought with that mindset of, hey, I'm gonna achieve the American dream by buying a home, were
Yes.
essentially left without anything to stand on. So that, up to this date, which is about, I say about 10, 11 years now, they're barely recovering. Those families are still trying to recover off of that incident situation that happened 11 years ago in 2008, 2007 timeframe. So you also mentioned, let's go back to what you started mentioning, your parents. Your parents came here and, they go to El Centro. They're speaking Spanish. I don't know if they were documented or undocumented at that time, if they had a green card or not, but they go to the fields over in Santa Clara now known as the Silicon Valley, the Valley of Technology, where Microsoft, Tesla, what other companies are there? The big brand companies are actually there, where there's an affluent environment and everybody wants to go there to get a job now. Or as before in the 1970s, that was all field. It was all essentially where the workers, farmers would be doing all that hard labor. And you were a kid. How old were you when you remember being in that field?
That's an excellent question. I was, moving up to the Silicon Valley, as I had mentioned, known as the Santa Clara Valley at that time because of the orchards and the technology companies. Actually, Microsoft is based in Seattle, so the big companies, yes, no, the big companies here in the Silicon Valley is Google, Facebook, and then YouTube up the peninsula, and Apple, and so many Intel, many giant companies. But at the same time, when I was a kid, it was interesting because I lived in what we know as a barrio, and a barrio was a resource for many Latinos, but outside of the barrio, it was very foreign to really adapt. And adapting, it really happened in terms of acculturation through a teacher of mine in the 4th grade. Her name's Miss Sanders. She was actually my speech teacher and therapist because first language Spanish, she taught me how to read and write English and really look at things. But by acculturation, I felt that it was always important for me to maintain my culture. So never was there a day where I'd return home and speak English to my parents. I always maintained that pride, that culture,
Okay.
and that sensitivity to my parents, because my parents, they did work those jobs that they only spoke Spanish at work. And my parents' hard work and work ethic really taught me a culmination of two things. One, education was most important, but two, always take pride in hard work.
Right, of course. Fantastic. That's awesome. So you're in 4th grade. You have this teacher that helped you learn the language, speech therapy, and then you move on to middle school, and then you move on to high school.
Yes.
At what point did you actually say, all right, education is the key to actually succeed in life? Or was that something that came from your parents saying, hey, we're here, we're working hard, but you as a kid, we want you to excel in education, in your schooling, and do better than we are doing? Because ultimately, as a father or as parents, you want to see your children or the next generation to meet or exceed your expectations, but you want better for them. So
Yeah,
did that come from your parents, or was that something that came from somebody else outside of your family?
And I really enjoy this question because it actually, my parents both worked 2 jobs. So they were what I call home mentors and teachers and my guidance roadmap to success. But it really came from 2 individuals, and it started in middle school with my track coach. And my track coach identified that I had the talent to run a 4:40-minute mile, a mile under 5 minutes, and really showed that I had this drive and resilience to succeed on the track field. And he made sure that I had the same discipline in the classroom. And what he had the belief in me. And when someone on a school campus believes in you, especially as a Latino and a chavalito, you really, really have this this great feeling within and desire to succeed and really not only do it for the teacher, but more importantly, do it for yourself. And then the rewards, of course, are recognized in your home. And my dad and mom, as hard workers, early on in life, they really never said, "Hey, mijo, I'm proud of you," because it was just more of, their busy life. And not until later in life, I heard that from my parents, "Mijo, I'm very proud of you," because they knew that if they were to say, "I was proud of you" early on in middle school or high school, my dad especially, he was very wise, thought that would be the final point, in terms of my educational journey.
Right.
And then the second mentor was in high school, who was my track and cross-country coach, as well as my biology teacher. He today attends my yearly summit. His name is Mr. Paul Kilkenny. He's Irish, but I say he's Caucasian with a brown corazón. He really.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
He really has a lot of belief and pride and talking about how he really coached and was my biology teacher.
Fantastic. So a shout out to your biology teacher in high school, and he attends your summit yearly. And
Yes.
Also to your track coach, which is a person that was there that believed in you and allowed you to believe in yourself and allowed your parents to see you shine for what you really, the potential that you had in what you were doing. So in high school, you're going through the motions through the high school years. At what point, and obviously at home, you didn't have the support to actually say, "Hey, this is what you need to do steps by step on how to apply to a university, college level." How did you do that? How did that happen for you?
That's an excellent question. It actually, it really didn't happen to me in high school because, believe it or not, in high school, one of the things that they did with the kids from the barrio is they identified them as migrant ed students. So they really didn't put us on a top tier of paying attention to and providing a roadmap to how to take your SATs, apply to colleges, and my biology teacher is the one that had belief in me. But by that point, in terms of looking at preparing for an SAT, it was too late.
Right.
So I actually started at a junior college. I started at Evergreen Valley Junior College, which lies in the Evergreen area of San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And I matriculated credits quickly, and I had a vision and goal in mind to transfer to a four-year college in 2 years. Okay. So as it was in track and cross country, to finish fast, you had to put your mind on the prize. And that's how it was with my transfer to a four-year college.
So you're at the community college at that point, and a lot of students get lost in community college because why?
Yeah.
They don't have any guide or any mentors or anything like that. Did you find that the way you found your path to a four-year university being transferred in 2 years, was that feasible because you communicated with a counselor at the community college and you found your path of what you really wanted to achieve, or how did you figure that out?
Well, I am very grateful to a program known as Puente Program.
Okay.
Puente Program is a bridge point that really was a network of Latino students, whether they were first, second generation Mexican American students or other Latino students that came together, that had Latino instructors and professors that taught math, English, and science. The three key subjects in order to transfer to a four-year college and understand that process. So the teachers instructors and professors that I had during that time Mr. Regua was my English instructor. Mr. Estrada was math and algebra 2, trigonometry, calculus instructor at Evergreen and San Jose City at the time. And he worked full-time at IBM. So he really had his skins in the game in terms of the Silicon Valley. And more importantly, he had the passion for elevating and lifting Latino students to make sure they would transfer to a 4-year college. And then
So through the Puente program, you find that there's this group, collective organization of mentors that help you, teachers and whatnot. And then the counselors guide you through, and then you figure out what you want to do. Whatever it is as a student, you figure out what it is.
Yeah.
What was it for you that attracted you? And how was that geared towards going into San Jose State?
You know, that's an excellent question, because San Jose State, being a commuter school, I lived with my parents, when I attended San Jose State.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that I've learned in my process of college is that many Latino parents and Mexicano parents specifically have this fear of their child leaving home and going to a college across the country, on the other side of the country, whether it's the East Coast or the Midwest in Chicago. And the fear for me is still there in terms of me being a dad of 3 children. Mm-hmm. And I think that fear stems from my parents, being afraid of me leaving home. But once I attended a master's program, of course I left home, but I think the experience in itself was really having gratitude of my parents being amazing parents. But at the same time, I think that in order for many more Latinos to graduate from college, we have to really show them at an early age that the journey to success is really being exposed to these different environments, whether it's an environment on the East Coast or in the Midwest. It really is part of the fabric of success.
Yeah.
And
so putting them in that scenario where they have to fend for themselves to a certain extent, but also to see what is opening the world to them, and having them get out of their cocoon, essentially, or the nest for that matter, which is the home. And
yes.
So that's something that you're saying. So, and you end up going to San Jose State, and then you go to Stanford to get your master's, right? Did you go to Stanford? No, you didn't.
No,
oh, no.
San Jose,
but you're connected to Stanford somehow. I know that for a fact.
Right. No, and I'm glad you asked about Stanford. So when I finished at San Jose State, I attained a 4-year degree, my undergrad. And after my 4-year degree, I worked in a field of social work. And at that point, I had a mentor. And it's very interesting that my mentors early on were all white men, right?
Okay.
And I think as Latinos, we have to have many more Latino mentors out there.
Right.
And his name's Mr. John Tweeten. John Tweeten, he an incredible mentor. He encouraged me to apply to Stanford, an MPA program, Masters of Policy Analysis. Mm-hmm. And I did get accepted to Stanford. And I remember the day when I got the letter. And at that point in 1994, for the graduate program, it would have been $60,000. Wow. And at $60,000 in '94, I would have had to really apply for student loans. Right. Because it's a master's program. Right. So I decided not to attend. So I've been from San Jose State. I love San Jose State. Go Spartans. And I feel like a Spartan.
There you go.
But years later, after my book was published, as I was mentioning about the market crash, I felt that the book had to continue its momentum. So in 2010, I started the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, based off of my book, Building a Latino Future, as a platform for Latinos to have access to these great thought leaders that are in my book. And the first summit was on Sand Hill Road, the venture capital mecca of the world. Okay. And then the second to the 10th annual summit was at Stanford University, at the Stanford Faculty Club.
So
And
was the leadership conference first, or did Es Tiempo come first, the LLC?
Es Tiempo came first, yes. Es
So,
Tiempo,
so what time did you actually found or created Es Tiempo, and what was the mindset behind it?
yes. So in 2001, I created the mantra and the saying of Es Tiempo, it's time, based on the fact that I first started as a sole proprietor. So I started doing some consulting, some coaching on the side, and I had a job, but I really wanted and aspired to be an entrepreneur. And then in 2007, I became an LLC. And why I formed Es Tiempo as Es Tiempo LLC is because I knew at that point that my book was going to be published. And my attorney, his name's Clay, he says, hey, Frank, you know, an LLC would be great because you're going to be a public speaking figure out there. You're going to have a book, and you really want to, you know, protect your rights in terms of what you are doing with Es Tiempo. And Es Tiempo really is a phrase that's so important to our community at large, because it really is time for all of us to come together and really believe in one another, elevate one another, and celebrate our leadership.
Correct. And that was, so essentially that is the dot behind the origination and creation of Es Tiempo for you, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Over time, and I'll get to the summit in a little bit, but over time, through Es Tiempo LLC, how has that changed for you, or has it remained the same?
It has grown in the sense that, as you had mentioned, Lazaro, you and I met on LinkedIn, and I believe it's important to show our presence in the community at large, show the community that we're not going anywhere. We're growing in numbers, but what's more important than growing in numbers is growing in numbers in terms of educational attainment, venture capital attainment, executive attainment, Fortune 500 board attainment, and overall equal pay for Latinas in the workplace, and showing that living here in the Silicon Valley, we have more Latino innovators that are not only part of a company, but are starting their company and are being taken seriously by investors. And so Es Tiempo is growing, and from organic to where it's at today, it really has shown to me that it is an important message for our community, because day after day, you know, we all understand, and all respect to the late Cesar Chavez, si se puede. Well, we understand that it can be done, but it's time to do it.
Right, correct. And part of the Es Tiempo is also, we have to start believing in ourselves. You mentioned a key factor, mentors, and you mentioned Puente, which is an organization that is still around, not very prevalent all over the community colleges or colleges, but it's still around. I know about it. I heard about it when I was in college as well. But there's other organizations that also support, like SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's MESA. There's MESA, Mathematics Engineering, and they also help out a lot of the community students to go ahead and reach out. But overall, we as Latinos have to find mentors that look like us, mentors that we can refer to and say, hey, that person is also a Latino, has a similar background, similar culture. Now, I'm not saying that we should exclude ourselves from the main melting pot, but also just making sure that we have our own identity and that we bring value to the society that we're in, and that we as a society culturally, that we say, hey, our culture has value that we can support and we can bring into this society to make it better, to improve on it. So that's where I see that Es Tiempo is functioning. And then you develop the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. So you said that it was more or less like a continuation off of your book to go ahead and not lose that momentum. How has it grown, and what surprises have you gotten off of it that you said, oh my God, really? It's been 11 years and it's still going? Or what
Yes.
what has been the most surprising thing that's happened and developed off of
Yeah, and I first want to start off with what you had mentioned about Puente and SHIP. Last year, SHIP, the CEO, the national CEO,
that?
Raquel
Raquel,
Campos.
right?
Yeah,
Raquel
Raquel,
Campos, right?
she was one of our speakers and a phenomenal leader. And with Puente, I was very honored in 2010 as things really come in full circle. I was asked to be a keynote speaker at the El Camino Community College in Los Angeles. So everything that we do is really reciprocal. It has to go in a full circle, and we always have to be mindful that in giving back, it's not giving back because you feel that it's some sort of privilege. It really is part of who we are as people and as a community. And so with the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, speaking of human thought leadership and moving the needle and really being mindful of how many folks have benefited from the Leadership Summit, I've been very honored to hear a few stories where there have been aspiring entrepreneurs that have attended the summit that work for companies, but at the same time, we all have that seed of entrepreneur within our DNA. And there have been a couple of folks who have shared with me that they've been inspired from the summit. And for example, one back in the day, his name was Edward. He started a Manos Accelerator, which really pays attention to entrepreneurs that go through an accelerator program and meet with angel investors and venture capitalists. And his motivation to start his organization back in 2013, right around there, was due to the fact that he attended one of the leadership summits.
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah. And
Fantastic.
then, yes. And then there was an honoree, the great Dr. Jerry Porras, who was honored a lifetime award at the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. And a couple of years later, they start LBAN, but during dinner, he had mentioned that he was looking at starting something big and something that was about and for Latinos.
Okay.
And LBAN is a great program that's happening at Stanford University, and it has, I believe, 3 cohorts per year that bring entrepreneurs throughout the country for these programs that they have set through the LBAN scaling SLAY program they have in place. And there have been many other individuals who have become confident in their speaking abilities because they've been panelists and been chosen as panelists at the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. And I've seen them thereafter participate as panelists, because one thing that I believe in is, as I mentioned to you early on in this interview, in the 4th grade, being a person that Spanish being my first language, going through a speech therapist and becoming confident in my speaking abilities, it was only because I was given the opportunity to be competitive on the track field. And then through that, it transcended from a coach, Mr. Paul Kilkenny, speaking to me, and he says, you have something within you, and I could see you sharing your story. So years later, in terms of the Leadership Summit, that's what it's really about, is all Latinos, we all have a personal, powerful story to share. And so when they attend the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, it ignites and it inspires them to share their story. And I really feel that I'm not the one that started this just because of the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. We have been doing this as leaders for hundreds of years. But in terms of a forum and to be taken seriously by the general public, the folks that, as I mentioned, that are really running big companies that happen to be non-Latinos, to show that Latinos should be part of the boards, should be part of, where the buck is being moved, because the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit is really based in an area, in a hub that is a mecca of the United States.
That is correct. There's a lot of power, a lot of potential there, but there's a lot of Latinos that are also not being represented. And one of the things that I read about you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that you tried to go and give a TEDx talk, and for some
Yes.
odd reason it didn't really pan out. So that's another reason why you have this forum with Silicon Valley Leadership Latino Leadership Summit, to go ahead and allow and open that forum for individuals to come and share and present different topics and their ideas, and to essentially become mentors to a community. And through your efforts, you've seen success stories come off of that by individuals that attended for one reason or another. They get motivated because you mentioned something key. We all, and I'm a Latino Mexican first generation coming over here to the United States, and we all have this great idea of, hey, voy a poner una tiendita, I'm going to do this shop, or I'm going to do this, or create videos, or do something. But sometimes we don't really know how to do it. We don't really know how to maneuver through the intricacies of the political, getting things set up, or where to get funding, or how to even do a proposal writing to go ahead and do it. But if we see mentors and we reach out to them and we say, hey, this is my idea, it might not necessarily be well structured, but at least we have some sort of idea by getting mentors, getting feedback. And I think that's what Es Tiempo LLC is doing, as well as the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit is also trying to achieve and empower individuals. If I can mention that, that's something that I see myself looking through it from the outside. So.
No. Thank you, Lazaro. Yes, the reason I mentioned the post of TEDx is because many Latinos have powerful stories to share, and I feel that at times TEDx could be biased to hear that it's spreading a message, right? And I think that sometimes when I hear the stories on YouTube and I listen to other stories outside of TEDx of powerful, inspiring Latino stories, I'm like, there has to be this bias. And for me, as a Latino that's accountable and passionate about our community, I feel like Es Tiempo Speaks, as I mentioned on LinkedIn, is an important platform for Latinos to share their stories at the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, because I am very fortunate that many giant companies are sponsors at the summit, and they're present. And some of their chief diversity officers or key senior leaders are present at the summit. And all it takes is 3 minutes of a person to share their story, so it really resonates and sparks that excitement throughout the room. But more importantly, I always say what's most important about the Leadership Summit is not being in this bubble for one day, but spreading the message outside of, for example, the summit, Lord willing, with uncertainty today, Lord willing, it's set for May 16th. But outside of May 16th, that message is a continuum. It's not just a day message, but I really, as you know, Lazaro, I really welcome and invite folks to share their stories daily through LinkedIn, which is a powerful platform.
Correct.
And sharing my message with you today is a powerful platform through you, because I'm very honored that you're taking the time to interview me.
Well, I'm honored that you're making time for me to actually speak to you and to ask you a couple of questions. Thank you for doing that. You mentioned faith.
I just want to say you're the leader. You're the leader. You're asking me the questions, and
Right.
I always like to make sure that everyone has a leadership say at the table.
Right. So thank you for that. I do want to focus on you mentioned the Lord being willing, and your faith is really strong from what I can see. how much of a role does your faith actually play in you, your family, and what you've
Yeah.
achieved?
Well, thank you. Faith plays a major role in my daily life. My parents were very, God rest their soul. They were both very religious, and they took me through, baptism, first communion, confirmation. My marriage was in a Catholic church where I made my first communion, and I'm wearing right here the cross that I've been wearing since the fourth grade
Right.
when I was given it from my first communion. And faith plays a role, essentially not just as a figure, but as a practice. And I think that we really have to be kind folks to others, because I really believe that every person, and this is where faith plays a role, that every person outside of my home here has not only kindness in their heart, but has potential to succeed within them. And that's a big part to believing in the Lord.
Right, right. So, and the reason I asked is just because, we all have hard times and difficult times,
Yes.
and we somehow have uh, essentially an anchor to hold on to, and that necessarily, in your case, faith is that anchor that ties you down and that holds you down along with your family, your wife, and your three children. And
Yes.
you are a father. You mentioned that. You made it really clear. Before you actually were a father, did you envision yourself having a small family, a large family, family at all?
Yeah, I prayed for it. Yes.
Okay,
Yes. I,
okay.
just, we're human. And before I met my wife, we all um, tried to find that right person in life. And
Mhm.
I remember I prayed for a good, strong woman, and a woman that happened to be a Latina that had the same belief systems as me. And sure enough, that's who I married. Her name's
Right.
Molly. Her birth name is Amalia. And she is the person that really, one day you'll attend the Leadership Summit, Lazaro. I invite you as a guest.
Thank you, sir.
And yes, and she is the one that uh, I like to say is the brains behind the operation, because she really is the the logistical, the strategic person that really helps me a great deal with the Leadership Summit.
So it's a good thing that you mentioned that because she is supportive of your efforts. So I'm going to
Yes.
go back a little bit on when you started Es Tiempo, when you started not Si Se Puede, when you started the Silicon Valley
Yes.
Leadership Conference. So how was that with you being married and you having children? How did your wife, or how did that discussion go when you say, hey, honey, I'm gonna go ahead and start this, and this is my vision, this is what I think is right, and this is what I'm gonna do. She probably said, are you sure? We have family, we have kids to feed, we have a mortgage to pay, or we have rent to pay. How are we going to do this?
Well, I just want to start, with my wife. The
Mhm,
first process was the book, Building a Latino Future.
mhm.
And as many authors out there they have people who believe in them. But my wife was the biggest supporter, not only in believing in me, but she was actually the person that was like my ghostwriter. She really was critic of my writing. And I'm the type of person that could pick up the phone or email an individual and get things going in terms of meetings and execution. But my wife is really, really a great wordsmith person, and made sure that the book was 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 not going to waste people's time.
Okay,
And
okay.
yes, and so with that and the transition to the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, the book being the infrastructure, she believed that it could be a success.
Okay.
So she had made sure that, because I published author, Ken Blanchard wrote the foreword for my book. Ken Blanchard lives in the San Diego area, not far
Okay.
from you.
Okay.
Wrote the 1 Minute Manager. What, at the end of the day, my wife says, the most important thing for the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit is credibility. And the credibility was something that she always holds me accountable and making sure that it is done at the best possible quality that it could be actually performed at, because it really is a performance. It's not something that I just decided one day, okay, I'm going to get some speakers together, I'm going to have a leadership summit. It, as I mentioned, with my wife being very strategic, with me being the person that is taking the initiative to reach out to key folks that are not only highly credible, but Latinas and Latinos that all have that same commonality that I do. And
Right.
what that is really giving back with el corazón. And I really have that due diligence within me to make sure that those individuals that I identify are those type of folks that are really giving Latinas, Latinos. So with my wife, yes, she not only holds me accountable, but in terms of being supportive, I would say she's like a venture capitalist. She says, okay, Frank, you go out there and raise the money. And you know, for the summit, she believes that, like you had mentioned, yes, we have a mortgage payment, we have a family, and it is a risky business. But at the same time, what I feel with little risk is when you have a high level of passion, because you can't look at it as, you know, something that's just about trying to make money. It's not about that. It really has to be about chasing your passion, and then, you know, other things follow passion.
Correct. And the reason I was asking is because I just wanted to know, and I wanted the audience to know that it wasn't just your dream, it wasn't just your idea, that you also had the support of your wife, and I'm assuming your children are to a certain extent supportive of it because they're fairly young, but they will also eventually have a larger role to play in the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Conference, as well as the Es Tiempo LLC, doing different tasks. And I don't know if you've already started doing that with them, giving them little things to do to be
No,
able
no,
to
yeah.
responsible of it.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because both of my daughters have volunteered at well, actually, my oldest daughter, her name's Alia. She's volunteered at 4 summits, and this upcoming summit, both of my daughters, Alia and Bria, will be volunteers at the summit. Bria is 12 years old, and exposing her to these great leaders.
Right.
And you know, my daughter Mila is really the person that inspires me the most of anybody in this world. My daughter Mila is my middle daughter. She's disabled, but I say she inspires me most because you know, I was in the process of giving up writing the book when my daughter Mila had an almost near-death experience.
Wow.
And yes, and she was hospitalized several times, and one hospitalization she was in for 6 weeks. And we have a dear family friend, Deanna Brown, who at the time sat on Tony Robbins' board of directors for one of his foundations. And she calls. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I get on the phone and she says, Frank, Molly shares with me that you're writing a book. And I said, yes. I said, right now is not the time. And for some reason, you know, she's very well spoken in the sense that she could calm the nerves of anxiety, right? And I had this anxiety of getting back into the room to see my daughter Mila, getting off the phone, and she eased it in a way that had me stay on the phone with her. And she says, okay, all I have to say is I respect your time, Frank, but when you go back into that room and you see your daughter Mila, and she had tubings in her, she says, just think of the fact that me and Tony Robbins would want you to continue writing your book.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And that was just so profound that that my daughter Mila at that point, I mean, she's nonverbal and she can't walk, but she's the strongest individual I know because she complains the least out of all of us.
Right.
Myself, my wife, my oldest daughter Alia, my youngest daughter Bria, and so
Wow.
she really is the strongest person.
Okay, that's
But
fantastic. Thank
I
you. Thank you
really,
for sharing. Thank you for sharing that one with me. That's, even though it's a hard situation that you went through, something good came out of it. And there's things that usually happen to make you continue and to make you move forward. And I think that was something that God wanted you to receive that phone call at that moment to
yes,
continue moving forward. And sometimes little miracles happen that we don't really know how to acknowledge and that we don't really know how to deal with. But that, probably that, to me, that sounds like one of those miracles happening to you at that moment when you were going down this path of desperation and of, hello?
yes. Could you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I lost you there. So I was saying that going through this path of desperation. So
Yes,
with that being said, you're a successful Latino. You have achieved so much, and you have the Es Tiempo LLC. You founded the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. What would you say to a young individual, that goes to your summit? And they don't know where to start? What would you tell them to go ahead and focus
I would ask them to identify with two people in the room. And for example, there's always over 300 folks in the room. And this May, there should be about 400.
on?
And I always let the young person know, don't feel overwhelmed in the sense that you have to meet everybody. Look at two people that you feel that you will not only connect to, but make sure that the person that you connect with not only expresses and shows interest, but make sure that you always stay consistent in terms of not giving up and reaching out to them. For example, a lot of individuals that are young may feel a little bit intimidated. We all were intimidated at a young age,
Right.
and today there are times where we still are intimidated. But at the
Yes.
same time, a young individual, whether it's a millennial and soon a Generation Z, reaches out to a person that they say, hey, you know what? I emailed them, I called them, they didn't return my call or they didn't email.
Right.
I always say, have patience, because patience not only pays off,
Right.
but individuals that have these busy lives and busy schedules, it's not that they don't want to return your call or return your email. It's just they may be overseas, they may have a family crisis, they may have other things going on. So I really advise them to look at the big picture.
Right.
And the big picture is they will have interest in mentoring you. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been at the summit. So that's
Right.
my message for
Right.
that's my message for the young individuals.
Okay, that's for young individuals that are looking to get started and they have no idea how to do it, to actually go find a mentor. And if they attend the summit, to connect with two individuals and keep those connections and follow through in communicating with them. And
That's
why I
right.
say follow through is because sometimes those individuals just talk to them at the conference during that time, and then they don't follow through with fostering that relationship. And I think that is key to continue fostering that relationship, to continue texting, to continue making those phone calls, to be
Yes.
accountable
Yes.
to whatever feedback you receive from the older successful mentor if you're a young individual, and for the older more seasoned individual, to be patient and to also say, hey, my time is valuable and I'm trying to help you, but I also want something in return, which is not monetary. It's also you paying attention, following through with the commitment that you're doing. So that's amazing. That's really cool. That's awesome. I want to ask you something else. With social media, with all this global information going around, sometimes it is hard to stay focused. What type of advice would you say to individuals, not just young individuals, to any individual, to continue staying focused in their goals, and to continue staying focused in spite of all the negativity in the social media?
Go outside, find a hobby. Find a hobby that is really about outdoor activity, whether it's hiking, a run, or frisbee. Something that really, something that really takes your mind away from, social apps and virtual chasing the rainbow. Because one of the things that really happens in life is, in order to be successful, one needs to have not only focus but discipline, and putting things in action item areas, doing it as we call old school style. If you need to write it down on a notepad, write it down on a notepad. Because what happens is, that's my advice, because what happens is that you go back to your phone, and yeah, it's great to set appointments and priorities on your phone, but many of the times the younger folks are going to get distracted and go onto that app. And I think that if they really write goals, just as they did back in the day on sticky notes or
Right.
on a notepad,
Right.
it's a visualization that becomes an actualization. And so that's my advice.
Okay, fantastic. So that's something that's very valuable. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to ask you a couple more questions. What book or movie or podcast have you found that has been very useful, and that you wish more individuals, and this goes for the audience, my audience, the audience that you're going to reach out to go ahead and focus on and to get benefit from? So is there anything that you want to share with us that you find valuable?
Yeah. Of course, one of my mentors early on, as far as I mentioned, I wish I would have gone to the Stanford Graduate School of Business, but I met him through Stanford. He's in my book. Dr. Jerry Porras, Built to Last, is a great book. That's a visionary book of companies that are sustainable. When he wrote it early on with Mr. Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, that's another book that I would advise. And then one of the things that I would say for the younger folks is, instead of getting on their phone and going on TikTok or these other apps, if you want to go on and stream a movie, it's very powerful to get on Netflix and look at documentaries that are really about life
Right.
that's happening. Because in life, with all these moving parts, it really puts a finger on the pulse of a millennial and a Generation Z to realize that documentaries are real, and social media is fake a lot of the times, just to really hype a person up. And I think that when kids, millennials or Generation Z, get hyped up, it takes away from focus. And at the end of the day, focus is the key element and the key success factor for the eye on the prize.
Right. Correctly. And you said patience and you said discipline. So be patient
Yes.
and be disciplined, and
Yes.
continue carrying that focus through. So what is if you had to choose any superpower, what do you think your superpower of choice would be? And why?
I would say learning how to fly.
Learning how to fly.
Yeah, I would say my superpower would be learning how to fly. I think with you had mentioned Tesla. Tesla is here in the Silicon Valley.
Right.
It's in Fremont, which is about 15 miles from here. And soon, if there's going to be flying cars, I think in terms of intelligence, there should be flying humans.
Okay.
And that would be a superpower, to oversee things that are unfortunate in this world, and how we could help individuals that are less fortunate, like the homeless, and flying over sectors in the U.S. and identifying encampments where we could really galvanize together as a human superpower to as a flying person, showing these areas where these areas need to be focused on in terms of building infrastructure within those communities.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for explaining why you would choose the power of light to be able
Yes.
to help and support in a good manner for society. So that's amazing.
Yes.
What is your definition? You've achieved so much, and you've obviously published a book. You're an author. You have your organization, Es Tiempo LLC. You founded this summit for the Silicon Valley Latino leadership. What
Yes.
is your definition of success at this point? And obviously, it could change in the future. But at this point, what is your definition of success to you?
Consistency, dedication, and purpose. Consistency, doing it daily. Dedication, being a family man, and being dedicated to my wife, and understanding that dedication has to be consistent. And then I said dedication, consistency, and purpose. And why are we here? I mean, we all have a shelf life, if you will.
Right.
And I think the purpose is to really find within us, all of us, what drives us. We all have a purpose, and for some it's different, but for all, at the end of the day, it really is a God-given gift that we're set on this earth for. To
Fantastic.
provide.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that definition of success to you at this point. Let's say you had a time machine. Let's say
Yes.
you had the ability to go back in time, but a particular time, back to you as a fourth grader. So you would be about 8 or so,
Yeah.
and you had about 2 to 3 minutes. What would you say to that little chavalito, little Frankie Carbajal, at that time? 3 pieces of advice that you could share with him.
I would say, Frankie, just remember that your life is about a purpose, and your purpose in life is to really change lives. And you're going to do that. But at the same time, Frankie, right now in the 4th grade, you have to ask more questions. And when you ask these questions, make sure that you ask these questions in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because what that's going to do, Frankie, is that's going to prepare you to ask questions on how to apply to Stanford or the University of California at Berkeley, so you don't have to go too far from home. So make sure you ask a lot of questions, Frankie, in about 3 years from now.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for sharing that insight with the audience. So essentially, ask questions, be inquisitive, be curious about what you see, what you do throughout your life, and don't be fearful of what could, your imagination, setting goals and actually going for them. They could be far-fetched, but those far-fetched goals will get you to succeed. You might not reach all of them, but if you reach one, you will be successful. And I think that is what Mr. Frank here wants us to know and to actually achieve and succeed, to go ahead and continue asking those questions. And those hard questions are the ones that will get us to move forward. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Frank Carbajal. I wish you success in the coming event of, your Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Conference. I wish you continued success in your family, and I wish you continued success in everything that you come out. However, the Es Tiempo LLC continues to develop. I hope that we can be part of it at some point and continue to move forward. And I look forward to you to also continue touching base with me in the future. For our audience, thank you so much. This has been Lázaro Herrera from Success Innovation, Mr. Frank Carbajal from Es Tiempo LLC. We will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for listening and watching another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. I hope you enjoyed listening or watching to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. In this episode, I certainly learned a lot from Frank Carbajal from the Es Tiempo LLC Foundation. I hope that you also enjoyed the episode, and if you found it of use, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and also share with other individuals that would benefit from listening to this episode. Once again, thank you so much for joining Success Innovation in another wonderful episode. I invite you to continue and to join me again in the next interview. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.